An old man is dying on a rock in the middle of the sea. The rock has a name, Patmos, a bare ridge of black volcanic stone in the Aegean, the kind of place an empire sends people it wants the world to forget. There is no soft thing on this island, no family, no congregation, just wind salt and the slow arithmetic of an old man's remaining days. And then the air changes. A voice comes from behind him, a voice like rushing water, like a trumpet, like the sound the ocean would make if the ocean could speak your name. And the old man, who has seen more than almost any human being who ever lived, does the only thing a person can do in the presence of something that vast. He falls, face down, knees gone, lying on the rock like a dead man, because part of him is sure that he is about to be one. We will get to what that voice said to him, but not yet. Hold him there, face down on the stone. We are going to come back for him, because that old man is the last stop on a road that runs all the way back to the beginning of the Bible. And the road is built out of 2 words. You have probably heard the claim. Maybe a pastor said it. Maybe you saw it on a coffee mug or a calendar or a graphic shared 1,000 times online. The claim goes like this. The phrase, "fear not," appears in the Bible exactly 365 times, one for every single day of the year, as if God sat down before the foundation of the world and rationed out courage like a daily vitamin. It is a beautiful idea. It is also not true. Go and count. Pick up a concordance, open any honest translation, and the number simply will not land on 365. It shifts depending on which language you read, which phrases you allow, whether you count "do not be afraid" and "fear not," and "be not dismayed" as the same thing or different things. Nobody serious arrives at 365. The number is a myth that grew legs because it sounded good. But here is what most people miss. The truth is better than the myth, because "fear not" was never meant to be a quota. It was never a daily allowance of bravery. When you actually trace the words through the Bible, and we are going to trace every important one tonight, you find something far stranger and far more personal than a number. You find that God almost never says "fear not" to a comfortable person. He says it to a childless old man staring into an empty future. He says it to a slave woman dying of thirst in a desert with her son. He says it to a coward hiding in a winepress, to a starving widow with one handful of flour left to a teenage girl in a town nobody important had ever visited, to terrified shepherds, to a father holding his dead daughter, to a prisoner in a sinking ship, and finally, to an old man face down on a rock in the sea. The Hebrew is al-tira. Just to go back to the beginning, not the beginning of the world, the beginning of the words. The very first time God says "fear not" to a human being in the Bible, he says it to a man who is lying awake at night doing math. He hates. His name is Abram. He is old, not middle-aged, old. And he is rich flocks, servant silver, everything a man of the ancient world was supposed to want. But he has no son in his world. That is not an inconvenience. That is a kind of death. Everything he has built will pass to a servant. His name will end with his last breath. When he lies down at night, you can imagine the ceiling pressing down on him, the same thought circling like a vulture. It ends with me. And into that dark, God speaks. "Fear not, Abram. I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward." Notice what God does not say. He does not say, "cheer up." He does not say, "think positive." He does not hand Abram a technique for managing anxiety. He says, "I am thy shield." The cure for the fear is not a feeling. The cure for the fear is a person. Hold on to that, because you are going to watch it happen again and again until you cannot unsee it. Then God takes the old man outside and tells him to count the stars, as if a man who cannot produce one child could ever number the sky. And Abram believes him. The Bible says that moment, an old man choosing to trust a promise he has no evidence for was counted to him as righteousness. The whole story of faith starts here in the dark with a frightened man and 2 words. But it gets stranger, because the next person God comforts is not the hero of the story. She is the one the hero threw away. Her name is Hagar. She is Egyptian, a servant, a woman with no power and no choices, and through a tangle of human impatience that is nobody's finest hour, she ends up pregnant by Abram and then cast out into the wilderness with her boy. Picture it honestly. A single mother, no money, no protection, a skin of water that runs dry under a desert sun that does not care whether you live or die. When the water is gone, she does the most heartbreaking thing in the whole scene. She puts the child down under a bush and she walks away far enough that she will not have to watch him die. And she sits down and she lifts up her voice and she weeps. This is a slave woman, a foreigner, a person the story could have easily forgotten. And the God of heaven sends an angel who says to her, "Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad." Here is the part nobody tells you. Hagar becomes the first person in the entire Bible to give God a name. She calls him El Roy, the God who sees me. Not the God of the rich man, not the God of the chosen son. The God who saw a dying servant woman in a wasteland and could not look away. If you have ever felt invisible, overlooked, written off, certain that nobody important knows or cares that you exist, that name was given to you by a woman who had every reason to believe God had forgotten her and was wrong. And then the words start to travel, because fear not does not stay in one generation. God says it to Isaac, Abram's son, when he is surrounded by hostile neighbors who keep filling in his wells, choking off his water, pushing him out of every place he tries to settle. Fear not, for I am with thee. God tells him at a place called Beersheba. The same 2 words the father heard now, spoken to the son, and then to the grandson. Jacob, old, now scarred by a lifetime of running and wrestling and grief, is told that his lost son Joseph is alive in Egypt, and that he must leave the only land he has ever known and go down into a foreign empire to find him. For an old man leaving home to die in a strange country is its own kind of terror. And God comes to him in a vision in the night and says, "Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation." Do you see the pattern forming? Watch what God is actually doing. He is not handing out courage to people who already have it. He is finding people at the exact edge of what they can bear: the childless, the abandoned, the surrounded, the displaced, and he is meeting them there, at the edge, in the dark, with the same 2 words every single time. There is an old Hebrew word that sits underneath all of this: yar. It usually gets translated as fear, and it does mean fear the kind that empties your stomach and locks your knees. But yar carries a second meaning too. It also means all. Before we go to the C, stop with me for 1 second, because something is happening here that you do not want to miss. Look back at who we have met so far: a childless old man, a thrown away servant woman, a surrounded son, a frightened, displaced grandfather. Notice who is not on that list: the comfortable, the secure, the people who had it all figured out. God is not in the business of telling settled people to relax. Every single fear not so far has landed on someone at the absolute end of their rope. And we are only in the first book. If that pattern is already getting under your skin, if you are starting to wonder which one of these is going to sound like your own life, do me a favor right now. Subscribe. This is the kind of slow, careful walk through scripture that the algorithm buries unless you tell it you want more of it. 2 million people are standing on the shore of the Red Sea, and they are about to die. Behind them, a cloud of dust on the horizon is becoming an army. 600 chariots, the fastest, most lethal war machine the ancient world had ever built, driven by a king who has changed his mind and wants his slaves back or wants them dead. In front of them, water, deep, dark, impassable water. To the left, desert. To the right, desert. They are pinned, trapped in the one geometry from which there is no human escape. And they turn on Moses. Of course they do. Fear does that. Fear makes you angry at the person standing closest to you. Were there no graves in Egypt? They scream at him that you brought us out here to die. You can hear it, can't you? The panic dressed up as fury. The way terror always looks for someone to blame. And Moses says 4 words that should be impossible for a man in his position to say. Fear ye not. Stand still. Stand still. With chariots bearing down. Stand still. It is the single most counterintuitive command you could give a cornered animal. And a cornered crowd is exactly that. Every nerve in their bodies is screaming, run, fight, scatter. And Moses says, do nothing. Watch. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. And then the sea opens. You know the picture. But sit inside it for a second instead of watching it from outside. Imagine walking on the dry floor of an ocean, a wall of held-back water towering on either side of you, close enough to touch fish suspended in it like glass. Your children's hands in yours, the roar of an army somewhere behind. That is what it feels like when God says, fear not, and then backs it up. He does not just calm the feeling. He splits the thing that was going to kill you. Here is what most people miss about that night, though. The fear was not foolish. The danger was real. The army was real. The water was real. There was genuinely no way out. God never tells Israel their fear is stupid. He never says you're overreacting. He simply makes himself bigger than the threat. Keep that in your mind because it is the whole key to these 2 words, and we are going to come back to it at the very end. Now leave the sea. Travel forward a few hundred years to a man hiding in a hole. His name is Gideon, and when we meet him, he is threshing wheat at the bottom of a winepress. That detail sounds small. It is not. You thresh wheat out in the open on a high, windy hill, so the breeze can carry off the chaff. You do it in a sunken winepress only if you are terrified, if you are trying to hide your food from raiders who sweep down every harvest and take everything. Gideon is a grown man, crouched in a pit, hiding from his enemies, doing his work in fear. And the angel of the Lord shows up and calls him, and you have to appreciate the comedy of this, thou mighty man of valor. Mighty man of valor. To the guy hiding in a hole. Gideon does not buy it for a second. He argues back. He points out that his clan is the weakest in the whole tribe and that he is the least in his father's house. Translation, you have the wrong man. I am nobody. I am the smallest person in the smallest family, in the smallest group you could have picked. And God's answer to all of that self-disqualification is essentially, fear not. I will be with thee. Not, you're stronger than you think. Not, believe in yourself. The opposite. You are exactly as weak as you fear you are, and it does not matter because I am going with you. Stay with me because the pattern is sharpening now. God is not recruiting the qualified. He is reassuring the terrified. And he keeps choosing the person the world would never pick. The Jewish historian Josephus writing in the first century, describes just how brutal these cycles of oppression and raiding were. Whole populations driven into caves and dens and hidden strongholds, living in constant dread of the next invasion. That is the world Gideon was hiding in. The fear was not a personal failing. It was the air an entire generation breathed. And into that air, God speaks 2 words and turns a coward in a pit into the man who will lead 300 soldiers against an army too large to count. But it gets stranger, because the next person God rescues from fear is not an Israelite at all. She is a foreigner, a widow, and she is preparing to die. There is a famine in the land, and a prophet named Elijah walks into a town called Zarephath. And at the town gate, he finds a woman gathering sticks. He asks her for some bread, and her answer is one of the most quietly devastating lines in the Old Testament. She tells him she has no bread. She has a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug, and she is gathering these few sticks to go home and make one last small meal for herself and her son, that we may eat it and die. That we may eat it and die. She is not exaggerating. She is a single mother at the literal end of her resources, planning her child's last meal and her own. She has done the math, and the math says they starve. And Elijah says to her, "Fear not." Then he asks her to do the hardest possible thing. "Make me a little cake first. Give the prophet the first piece of your last meal." It is an outrageous request. Give away the last of what is keeping your child alive. And it is wrapped in a promise. The jar of flour will not run empty, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the rains come back. And she does it. A starving Gentile widow takes a prophet at his word and gives away her last handful of flour. And the flour does not run out. Day after day, she reaches into a jar that should be empty, and there is enough. Not a mountain of food, just enough. Just enough for today, every day until the famine breaks. Here is the part nobody tells you about that story. Centuries later, Jesus stands up in his own hometown synagogue and points to this exact woman. Out of all the widows in Israel, he says God sent Elijah to a foreigner in Zarephath. He uses her as proof that God's mercy was never meant to stop at one nation's border. A starving outsider who trusted 2 words became a sermon on the lips of the Son of God. That is how far a single "fear not" can travel. Now hold that thought, because there is one more story in this stretch, and it might be the strangest of them all. It is the one that pulls back the curtain and shows you what is actually going on every time God says these words. A young man wakes up early in a city called Dothan, steps outside, and his blood turns to ice. Overnight, an entire enemy army has surrounded the city. Horses, chariots, soldiers ringing the walls in every direction. He runs back to his master, the prophet Elisha, and he is shaking. "Alas, my master, what shall we do? We are surrounded. We are outnumbered. We are finished." And Elisha, calm, unhurried, almost amused, says, "Fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them." Which makes no sense. The young man just counted. There are 2 of them in a city full of enemies. More than them, more than an army. What is the old prophet talking about? So Elisha prays one of the shortest, strangest prayers in the Bible. "Lord, open his eyes that he may see." And God peels back the surface of the visible world. And the young man looks again at the same hills he was just staring at in despair. And the mountain is full of horses and chariots of fire. An army of heaven encircling the enemy that was encircling them. It had been there the entire time. He just couldn't see it. And that right there is the secret hiding underneath every fear not. in this whole video. I'm adding the Joshua beat here to recover the length we trimmed in part 4, then closing Act 2 with the second CTA and the bridge into the New Testament. There is one more man we have to meet before we cross on into the New Testament, and he is standing in the worst possible pair of shoes. His name is Joshua, and his job is to replace Moses. Think about what that means. The greatest leader the nation has ever known, the man who parted the sea, who climbed the mountain, who spoke with God face to face, is dead. And now the people are looking at Joshua. Lead us into a land full of walled cities and giants and armies. Be what Moses was. You can almost feel the weight settling onto his shoulders, the impossible comparison, the certainty that he is going to fail in front of everyone. And God says it to him 3 times in a single conversation. Be strong and of a good courage. Be not afraid. Be not dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. 3 times. As if God knows that fear does not listen the first time. As if he is willing to repeat himself for as long as it takes. And there it is again, the same engine running underneath every one of these stories. Not you are capable, not you have what it takes, but I am with thee wherever you go. The courage was never supposed to come from inside Joshua. It came from who was walking beside him. So stop and look at the whole picture we have built. From a childless old man in Genesis to a terrified new leader on the edge of the promised land. Hundreds of years, dozens of people, and one unbroken pattern. God meets the cornered names their fear without shaming it and answers it with his own presence. If that pattern has shown you something tonight, if even one of these stories has felt like it was holding up a mirror, this is the moment to share this video with one person who needs to hear it. You almost certainly know who they are. Somebody pinned at their own Red Sea right now. Somebody hiding in their own winepress. Send it to them. That is the whole reason these words were written down in the first place, so they could travel to the next frightened person who needed them. Because here is what changes everything from this point forward. For 2,000 years, fear not had come from it. It starts with an old man who has stopped believing. His name is Zechariah, and he is a priest, and he is standing alone in the temple at the holiest moment of his life, burning incense in the presence of God while a crowd prays outside. He and his wife Elizabeth have wanted a child their entire marriage. They have prayed for years, and the years have answered with silence until they are both old, and the hoping has quietly died, the way hope does when you are tired of being disappointed. And an angel appears beside the altar, and Zechariah is in the plain words of the text troubled, and fear falls on him. And the very first thing out of the angel's mouth is the same word God has been saying since Genesis. Me, phobo. That is the Greek now we have crossed into the New Testament, me, phobo. Stop being afraid. Your prayer has been heard. You're going to have a son, and his name will be John, and he will prepare the way for someone greater than himself. And here is the strange, human, almost funny thing. Zechariah does not believe it. An angel is standing in front of him in the temple, and he asks for proof. So he is struck silent, unable to speak until the baby is born. Sometimes the hardest fear to break is not the fear of danger. It is the fear of hoping again after hope has hurt you. And God meets even that patiently across 9 silent months. But the angel was not finished with that family's town, because a few months later, in a forgotten village called Nazareth, the same messenger appears to a girl who is probably no older than 15. Her name is Mary. She is poor. She is engaged but not yet married. She has no power, no platform, no reason on earth to expect a visit from heaven. And the angel says to her, "Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God." The same two words, me phobo, spoken now, not to a patriarch or a prophet or a king, but to a teenage girl in a nowhere town who is about to be told that she will carry God himself. And she says yes, with words that have been spoken in churches for 2,000 years. Be it unto me according to thy word. She is terrified. Of course she is. Every part of this could cost her everything, her engagement, her reputation, her life. But she answers the fear with surrender. And history bends around a frightened girl who chose to trust two words. Then the night sky tears open. Out in a field, shepherds are watching their flocks. Men at the bottom of the social ladder, the night shift workers nobody thinks about. And suddenly, the glory of God blazes around them. And the text says they were sore, afraid, gripped with a great fear. The most natural reaction in the world. And the angel's first words before the good news, before the song, before anything else are the same as ever. Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy. The birth of God on earth is announced to the universe, and it begins with two words spoken to terrified working men in a dark field. Do you feel the pattern tightening? For thousands of years, these words came from heaven. Now they are being spoken inches from the newborn king, and soon they will be spoken by his own mouth. Watch what happens next, because the next time we hear "be not afraid," it is not an angel speaking. It is God in the flesh standing in front of a father whose child has just died. His name is Jairus. He is a respected man, a ruler of the synagogue, and his 12-year-old daughter, his only daughter, is dying. He pushes through a crowd, falls at the feet of a traveling teacher named Jesus, and begs, "Just come, just touch her." And Jesus turns to go with him. And then on the way, while there is still hope, a messenger arrives with 5 words that end the world for a father. "Thy daughter is dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore. It's over. You were too late." And Jesus, overhearing it, turns to a man whose heart has just been torn out and says, "Be not afraid, only believe." Think about the audacity of that. The child is dead. The professionals have given up. The mourners are already wailing. And the carpenter looks the broken father in the eye and tells him not to be afraid, and then walks into that house, takes a dead girl by the hand and says, "Little girl, get up." And she does. She gets up. She walks. Her parents are told to give her something to eat because she is hungry, because she is alive. The 2 words that had only ever held back fear at the edge of death, now spoken on the other side of it. There is one more before the end. And then we go back to that old man on the rock. A prisoner named Paul is on a ship in the middle of the Mediterranean, and the ship is dying. A storm called Euroclydon, a screaming northeaster, has had them for 14 days. No sun, no stars, no way to navigate. They have thrown the cargo overboard, then the tackle, then given up eating. The Roman historian Tacitus wrote about how lethal these sea crossings were, how an autumn storm in those waters was a sentence many men never came back from. Everyone on board, soldiers, sailors, prisoners, has accepted that they are going to drown. And in the worst of it, Paul stands up among them, a man in chains, with no reason to be the calm one, and tells them an angel stood by him in the night and said, "Fear not, Paul." Not one of them would be lost, only the ship. And a chained prisoner becomes the steadiest man on a sinking vessel because 2 words reached him in the dark. The same 2 words that reached Abram in the dark 2,000 years before. And now, finally go back to the rock. The old man face down on the black stone of Patmos. We left him there at the very beginning, collapsed, before a voice like rushing water, and I told you we would come back. His name is John, the last living apostle, the one who leaned on Jesus at the Last Supper, who stood at the foot of the cross, who outlived every other disciple and was exiled to a prison island by an empire that wanted him forgotten. The historian Eusebius preserved the memory of that exile. An old man alone at the end of everything, and the voice that knocked him to the ground, the glorified Christ himself, eyes like fire, face like the sun, reaches down and lays a hand on him. And out of that overwhelming, terrifying glory comes the gentlest, oldest sentence in the whole Bible. Fear not, I am the first and the last. Do you see what just happened? The same voice that spoke to a frightened teenage girl in Nazareth? The same God who spoke to a childless old man in Genesis? The same two words, altera me phobao, fear not, that began on the very first page now land on very nearly the last. The whole Bible is bracketed by them. From a man afraid of dying childless to a man afraid he had outlived his purpose on a rock in the sea. Fear not. I am the first. I am the last. I was there at your beginning. I will be there at your end. So here is the part the science actually agrees with. Your fear is not a flaw. When you feel it, a small, almond-shaped piece of your brain called the amygdala fires. Before your conscious mind even knows what is happening, flooding your body with adrenaline in a fraction of a second. You cannot choose not to feel it. It is the oldest wiring you have. And that is exactly why this matters. God never once says you shouldn't feel afraid. He never argues with the wiring. He does something stranger and kinder. He speaks straight past it. He doesn't say calm down. He says, I am with you, and lets the presence do what no command ever could. So this is not a story about a number. This is not a story about 365 days. This is not a story about a phrase you can stitch on a pillow. This is the story of a God who, from the first frightened man to the last frightened apostle, kept leaning down into the worst moment of a person's life and saying the same two words before he said anything else, which leaves three things to carry with you. The first is simple, and it is true whether you feel it or not. God does not say, fear not, to the comfortable. He says it to the cornered. If you're at the end of your rope tonight,